civilized place to share information. Twitter, I expose myself to acts of unkindness and inhumanity, so I've been more reluctant to share on Twitter. But if you have not signed up, if you don't know what Nextdoor is, just Google it, nextdoor.com. It's a great way to get information about crime. I have made some positive posts, and in fact, we use Nextdoor with a recent rash of those robberies where, no, I'm sorry, we didn't use Nextdoor, but I've posted some of the successes on Nextdoor. Yeah. I'm going to go, actually, I'm sorry, you had your hand up.
Now, you said that we have 2 patrol officers. Is that in our area that are just...
If I said that, I didn't fully explain, and it's a little complicated. So,
what does it mean?
Yeah, so here's basically how we're organized. So we have Patrol Division, which kind of has, I'll say, 3 different classifications of officers who are assigned to a beat. Community Resource Officer is one of them. So Officer Mack is your Beat 12 Community Resource Officer. I don't know if you're from 13. Beat 13 has their own Community Resource Officer who is normally assigned. So that is one class of officer. One officer assigned for problem-solving community resources.
But they're in an office, they're not wandering around?
No, they're out and about quite a bit. Some is administrative work, right? But they are out and about. We were just talking about his traffic control measures. He's got some priorities that he's looking at one-way traffic and things like that. If you as a community decide that the bicycle riding is a priority for the NCPC, then that would be something that he would, not necessarily be solely responsible for, because we all acknowledge that there's DOT involvement, there's BART involvement, there might be some community aspect of involving East Bay bikes, but how do we go through a great problem-solving process to come up with a solution that isn't necessarily entirely enforcement-based, right? So to fully answer your question, now we have patrol officers. Our patrol division.
Does that mean in a car? Does that mean walking?
So they can walk. I don't know if it's bicycle trained. Many of them are bicycle trained. They could be on bicycles, a car. You swim? Do you swim, Dave? Swimming. But yeah, so that can be.
So just to this area, you said you have so many officers, and how many were
Yes. So the patrol aspect, we have 3 watches, right? So meaning the times of shifts, we'll just say day watch, swing shift, and graveyard overnight.
Okay.
B12 has 1 officer assigned to each of those shifts on a 24-hour pattern.
Okay.
So all in all, in a 24-hour period, you have at least 4 officers that are responding to calls on the beat and have some measure of beat accountability. We have additional officers that you can see on the beat, right? Traffic officers on the motorcycles. They're not tied to this beat, but obviously they patrol and do traffic enforcement. We have walking officers in Rockridge, right? They were out on horseback, so you could see somebody on horseback that's tied to your community. There's a lot of different officers, but the officers that I have kind of direction and some custody and some direction available in terms of priorities and enforcement measures. The CROs, our crime reduction team that I didn't mention either, and our patrol officers.
And do you find that the private patrol that's in this area is helping?
So I cannot, so I was around when we first went through the exercise of really gaining private patrols, not only here but elsewhere in Oakland. I was supportive of any measure a community wanted to take to have a more visible deterrence. I think that if a security company is well-trained, security officers are well-trained, they are quite effective at observing and reporting. That's something that I can help with, and I will work with Chris on that, especially, and maybe Karen and Mike as well. It would be helpful if there's one sole company and you find that there's value and they're doing a good job and they're doing a good job observing and reporting, they are an asset that we can share and communicate with, absolutely.
Well, there is one.
Yeah, there is one.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I have not, so I've only been here for 3-4 weeks. I know that I was doing that 3 years ago. That's something that I can reinstitute that I just haven't gotten around to even thinking about, so thank you for mentioning that. Yes, sir.
Looking at the overall picture in Oakland, I understand murders have been down for a few years.
Yeah.
They're still pretty high
compared
to other cities, but it's probably 30% less than it was for, in the early 2000s. What are the main reasons that there's fewer murders in Oakland?
Well, I'll say the main reason is I think moving from a purely enforcement measure. So when I started out as a patrol officer, we would have 110, 120 homicides a year. At that time, just to paint a picture, we'd probably make 30,000 arrests. We would, I don't like the term stop and frisk because that's something that's kind of been mishandled and misused elsewhere, but it's a legal term. I don't want to get too wonky in the weeds on law and policy, but we would make a ton more detention stops than we do now, and we had more crime. And I think what we've been able to do through models like ceasefire that identify the most important players in a community, and what I mean by that is that a community this size, you may have as few as 300 people that are directly associated with extreme violence that would result in homicide, right? Maybe 3,000 to 6,000 gang members, but out of that, even in that high-risk group, you have a very, very small number of people that actually engage in really, really violent crime, such as homicide. You have the anomalies, like I know B12 suffered a suicide homicide earlier in this year on, was that Keith Avenue, I think, right? So you have those anomalies that are obviously tied to gangs or drugs or probationers or anything like that. But I think ceasefire's way of identifying who those people are. We provide outreach, customer notifications. Our CROs and CRTs and patrol officers are trained in how to offer these outreach resources, document the fact that we've identified this person as being at risk. We take their information, we turn them over to service providers, and the goal of ceasefire is, I'm not a big fan of this term either, but carrot and stick, right? There's a way out of this. We have a simple request: stop shooting people, right? It seems easy to stop doing that, but it's harder for some than others. And I think that through that program's success, I think that we have realized that through addressing some of those relationships and associations, having a really laser-like targeted focus on gangs and groups, and they are amongst us in North Oakland as well. We have beats, B10, where that carjacking occurs, is one of my problem areas, that I have certain neighborhoods that are too often visited by gangs and groups. But to use that as an example, being precise in who we're stopping, speaking to, offering outreach resources, and responding to, I think that it demonstrates a lot of leverage and a lot of power to make it to influence the right people. I'll get to the end of the story. So now we have, like you said, year to date we're 10%, but it is drastic depending on how far you go back, right? I'm horrible at math, so what's the difference between 50 and whatever the highest we've ever been? Today we probably average 30,000 stops in total, 12,000 arrests, right? So we're stopping a lot less people, we're arresting a lot less people, but we're experiencing less crime. So that, who knows causation and correlation, but I tend to think that if we've been doing something for a while and it's been working, keep doing it. Yes, sir?
Could you speak to the level of staffing for both OPD as well as dispatch? Because dispatch is a big question of mine trying to get through.
Yeah.
We need an officer. As I said, if we don't have the dispatchers, it doesn't matter how many officers we have if we can't raise one. Yeah,
that's a good point. And that comes with the community request for you all, too. So the one word, we're understaffed, right? But to put a positive spin on that, we are actively recruiting for dispatchers. We're actively recruiting for police officers. So if you know of people who would like to turn in an application, please steer them my way, and I will set them up with the right resources. We realize that our answering speed is below the national average. Numerous audits over numerous years have told us that we just don't have adequate resources. I'm not going to go into the hows and whys we don't have enough dispatchers. It just is, though. And the communications manager now is really aggressively trying to hire and retain people. It's a tough job. I actually think being a dispatcher is much harder than being a police officer. I wouldn't do it for probably any amount of money. It's really, really stressful, and it's one of those jobs where you get the problem on the front end and you don't get that resolution on the back end. It's just constant stress and very, very difficult, and I think that feeds into their retention problem as well. Officer-wise, I just want to, I didn't come prepared with stats, but over the past 5 years, whenever I look at OPD population, calls for service, Part 1 crimes, serious and violent crimes, and our staffing. We are consistently one of the most understaffed departments compared to cities with comparable populations, comparable calls for service, comparable parts of crime. I don't like saying that because it sounds like an excuse, and I'm not giving you an excuse. The fact of the matter is that because we've had that weakness for so long, it's become our strength. We are just simply used to doing more with less and doing a better job with less than other police departments. So in a way, it has refined our work ethic and just being very creative at times and resilient, I think, has made our strength. I would choose to have more officers. I would choose to have way more officers. If you go back to the studies that have been done and you look at those things I was talking about, we should probably be somewhere around 1,000 officers. Right now, I think we're hovering at 740, 750 around there, 730 something. So, and that's with having multiple academies going and trying to churn out as many officers as we can.
If I could add one more thing. If you have a medical emergency, you can call the fire dispatch and they will usually pick the phone up within 1 to 2 rings. That's very important. So a lot of times you cannot get through, or it takes 5 minutes on 911 to get through, but the fire will pick up on 1 to 2 rings. So make sure that number is 444-1616. And that goes to the fire dispatch station down in downtown Oakland.
I think we have that number on the NCPC website, and if we do not, I will put it there.
Okay. I didn't know that, so thank you. Hopefully it's true. Hopefully Chris isn't responsible for numerous accidents.
I'm called.
Anything else that I can...
Just one thing that occurred to me when I was walking yesterday to BART. Well, actually, I noticed today, too, on Miles Avenue, that walk down to BART, I saw glass again, cars getting broken into.
Yeah.
Oh, that's been like that for decades.
Yeah.
So luckily I come armed with information that I had that very same conversation with Mr. Jackson, and so I do not dispute that you're going to see piles of glass, but from those who know, we have less piles of glass today than we used to. And I'll say this, that we rely on crime data and crime statistics. Officer Mack has, I think we're one more auto burglary year to date than we were same 60-day period last year. So we're running roughly about even in a lot of things actually on this beat. Auto burglaries is one of the things that I tend to think that maybe at most 40% of auto burglaries are actually reported to us, just because most people, it's a pain. You don't want to go online. You can go online and file your own report, but that, I get it. It takes time. It takes resources. A lot of people don't do it, but I hope that same rate of non-reporting it runs relatively consistent year to year. In fact, I've seen one year where we made a concerted effort to have people report, and what happened, our crime shot up and it looked bad. But it is important to report the crime because I know where the hot spots are. I know when crimes are occurring. Part of what Officer Mack and Sergeant Kalange do for us is they take these community concerns, they look at the crime data, they look at the stats, and they turn to those B12 partners that I was talking about, right? So here's where our trend line shows where auto burglaries are occurring. It's along, Miles Ave, and we think that it's more of a morning type of offense. That allows me to make smarter decisions about where to put officers that can make the biggest impact for your community.
Is the Safeway parking lot on College still a hot spot?
Any parking lot near a major corridor, near commercial, I guarantee you has an auto burglary problem that could use more help. It's not one of the biggest, my biggest problem is not even on this beat. It's beat 8, it's in the Koreatown Northgate. That is, between Broadway and Telegraph, Valdez, that area. That's probably pound for pound, that's where I'm having the biggest issue. So where you may have kind of a hot spot on B12 at Safeway, just keep in mind that I have to look at things at at a little higher level, and I have to make decisions about where to put resources. So, and I'm telling you now, sometimes you're not going to appreciate how I make those decisions, but I do the best I can. Really good questions, thank you. I feel like I should have had this experience before my captain's test, I would have done better. You guys are throwing everything at me. But
I've heard that a lot of times when you have a string of, let's say, auto burglaries or robberies, that it's a small group of people doing it over and over again until they get caught.
Absolutely true.
And has that been true around here?
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's a good segue. So sometimes certain communities, certain NCPCs will not be happy when I take CROs, for instance. It's just necessary to do this because they're kind of, they're my queens on the chessboard. I can move them around. They're not tied to certain things, and they're more flexible. So there are times where some of those more serious and violent offenses are committed elsewhere. You may be losing an officer, but I'm telling you, this is not true 100% of the time, but it's true more often than not that the auto burglars who are hitting Safeway on beat 12 may be the same gang members that are also committing shootings on beat 10. So although your officers aren't addressing auto burglaries at Safeway, we're addressing the people who are likely to be doing your auto burglaries. So is it still work that's benefiting you? Absolutely it is. So we see more and more these days gangs, criminal groups, conspirators, whatever you want to call them, that will get into a car, stolen or not, and they will go not only from beat to beat, but neighboring city to neighboring city.
I was just going to ask, and they'll have a fairly wide range of where they will
Most of our burglaries that we're looking for were actively cooperating with neighboring cities. Absolutely. And that was true of our robbery series as well. The people that were doing those laptop robberies were doing them in other cities as well. And both these crimes have a lot in common. Obviously they're to make money, right? So these criminal groups and gangs, it's not like, so 20 years ago they would have been probably dealing narcotics to make money. That's just not the way to make money right now. It's much, much quicker. It takes a matter of seconds to take a high-value, high-dollar cell phone or a MacBook or a laptop from a car or from someone's table. There's more money to be made at a nice hourly ratio than there ever was dealing narcotics.
And where do those things get? Do they get fenced? Do they get sent off to Mexico, or what happens with them?
So I'm not an expert in this. So if I rely on secondhand information, I'm going to say that a lot of it is overseas fencing. That seems to be what the intelligence gives us. I don't think that it's local. I think if I had to take a guess, I think it's more overseas. I wish I knew more about it. You know, that would be a way that, and obviously something that we try, but it just hasn't really resulted in much.
Do you know what they get for a laptop the going rate is?
It's a lot more than you think. So for a cell phone that we get a buy one get one free when AT&T has a sale, so you drop down $700, you can get 2 phones. I've heard that on the street that's easily $400, $500. I've heard overseas rates that are actually exceeding the market rate for the States. So there's a lot of money, and who knows what. It's just like any market, right? There's a wholesale, there's a middleman, and there's a retail. So who knows what that actual car burglary gets, but it's more money than you would think.
Do these kill functions that they put on, like the iPhones, do they do anything in terms of making it less attractive?
So 3 years ago, last time I was here, I was very, very hopeful because we were actually leading the country in robberies per capita at that time, and I was very, very hopeful when Apple was putting in those additional security measures, but I'm telling you that I see too many phones stolen that I don't think that it's even a deterrent. And do you disagree, agree?
You can't tell when you're about to rob somebody or they're in a car if their phone is going to turn out to be a paperweight or not. It's really a risk.
So as a deterrent to crime, I don't think it's
Hasn't been effective.
The huge homeless encampments down there by the Korea
27 in North Bay.
27, yeah. All of a sudden disappeared or nearly disappeared after being there for about a year, which is, I hope those people got some better alternatives. But what actually caused that?
Thank you, everybody. I'm going out on a high note again. So there is actually Sergeant Kalonge knows more about that because he's actually been working with that beat 8 officer, Officer Cameron. I think it's a great example of looking at a problem a little bit differently, not necessarily with the hammer of enforcement, but collaboratively working. And you want to give us a little update on that?
Yes. So I've talked about it here a few times, but just to recap on how the city as a team approaches the homeless issue, it's very much a holistic, multi-factor approach. We certainly are not arresting people for being homeless, right? That's not a crime. There are certain crimes that occur within those communities, and we do enforce those as criminal investigations. However, as a city, we approach it as part of a task force. So we have a few officers and a sergeant on the task force, along with Public Works and other city officials. One of the public administrators of the city, Joe DeVries, has spearheaded these resource centers that have now popped up at 27 Northgate, and also you probably saw it before that a few months prior, 6th and Castro down by the police station. The thought there is to allow sort of rehabilitation, some training, a safe space. They have people that move into those, what do you call them, tough sheds with bunk beds and lighting and heaters and such, have to abide by certain laws, like not state laws, but policies and rules within the group. And in exchange, they get housing and shelter, and hopefully can get back on their feet and then re-enter society in a productive way. So that's what has occurred as of late at 27 and Northgate. In conjunction with the opening of that center, which houses up to 40 people at a time, they have begun to disallow people from camping on the sidewalks in that zone, which there were 110 humans living within Sycamore, 27th Street, and Northgate at that time. So obviously, 110 minus 40 is like, I don't know, 1 million or something, I'm not good at math, but it's not quite enough, right? So it's not a full fix for the issue, but it has allowed almost half of the people to get into that site. And as a result, you will also see more enforcement from the police side now, because the city has agreed that they will post signs under the freeway that say no lodging, no camping on this sidewalk. It is a public health issue, first and foremost. And so we feel supported now in taking enforcement from the city side. So you should not see any tents cropping up on the spaces that are posted. They have to do it in phases, though, because you can't just shove the other 70 people, right? See, I got there eventually, 70 people out of that zone. And there's nowhere to go, so we just end up kicking them into a different district, and then he can claim credit for it, but it's not like the problem went away, right? So that's kind of where we're at. Does that make sense? Any questions about that?
That's good.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It's also, I went to the NCPC meeting that's near there, and I think the community had a lot to do with it too. So it's a situation where in those cabin residents, they were part of that NCPC meeting, they're part of that community, they're getting resources and outreach from the community themselves, trying to find people jobs, trying to make sure that they're making great choices, and I think that's been helpful as well. Not everybody's a fan of the cabins, but you know, it seems to be working in some areas.
I might just as a comment on that, we had, RCPC had a town hall on homelessness. It's about going on 2 years ago, and I'm wondering whether it might make sense for us to ask the people from the city and the county to come back in and talk about what's changed in those 2 years, and whether there's anything that's happening that makes things maybe hopeful, and whether there's anything we as a community can be doing to work on that.
I think that's a great idea.
If you'd like to put that on the agenda, I can definitely reach out and see who would be available.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Next door had a thing about the people at bus stop being stabbed.
No. They weren't
Mm-hmm.
stabbed, but there was somebody that was
Menacing
with a
people.
knife.
Oh, yeah, yes. So I do not know, that was beat 13.
No, it was 12,
Was it
College
12?
in Claremont.
Okay, I think I got it through someone on beat 13, so I wasn't sure. So,
It was all over next door for a couple of days.
yeah, so I thought it was closer to the Berkeley border. Maybe I'm thinking of
Yeah.
Well, it is. The college in Claremont is very close to the Berkeley border.
They said a Berkeley police
Yeah,
officer
yeah,
turned the other way.
yeah,
right?
that's right.
So I have not been able to link that. I know that the next door post said that they reported it to police, but I don't know. So that means different things to different people. I know that the source so I don't see those next door posts, nor do I want to see them, right? I don't want next door to be something where I'm spying on people talking about things. But the source that told me about it said that they reached out to the primary poster and made sure that they needed to call Oakland Police Department on that. And then threatening with a knife means different things to different people, right? So yes, I'm aware of it. You know, this should be obvious, but if that was one of us, that's something we want to call 911 about and make sure that Oakland police officers responded to that incident and not just expecting a Berkeley police officer to do whatever it is they would do. I would also hope that if that happened, that the Berkeley police officer has access